convenience.
And we are live.
Very good. The regular meeting of the 54th and Lyndale Special Service District Advisory Board will now begin. Good afternoon. My name is Michael McLaughlin. I will be facilitating this meeting of the 54th and Lyndale Special Service District Advisory Board. Before we begin, I'd like to note that this meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. I will now call this meeting to order and call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum. So board members, when I say your name, if you can please say yes or indicate that you are present. Dan Campo.
Yes, I am present.
Kelby Howell. Dan Leitner.
Yes, I'm present.
We're also joined by Andrew Carlson and David Bauer with Public Works. With a quorum of advisory board members present, we will proceed. The next item on the agenda is actually the adoption of the draft agenda, as well as the third item are the acceptance of the minutes from the last meeting, which was July 28th of last year. If desired, we can the board can adopt those in one action. So I would be looking for a motion to approve both the proposed agenda and the draft minutes. Is there a motion?
This is Dan Campo. I can make the motion. I'd like to make the motion to approve the agenda and the draft minutes from the last meeting.
Very good. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Very good. If there's no discussion, I will call the roll on the adoption of the proposed agenda and the adoption of the July 28, 2020 minutes. Dan Campo.
Yes.
Kelby Howell. Dan Leitner.
Yes.
Very good. The agenda and the minutes are adopted. With that, we'll move on to our next item, which is public comment. I will note that we have not been joined by any members of the public. We will table this item until later in the agenda, should someone join us and wish to address the advisory board. Moving on then to discussion items. The first discussion item is the 2020 annual report. We wanted to take just a couple of minutes. This was included in the packet and sent to you to the board a couple of weeks ago. The highlights are that we did, as we did for the prior year's annual report, summarize all the services that the district provided. And I'll just note that in terms of trash removal from the district's 12 trash receptacles, we did remove just under 4,500 cubic feet of trash in calendar year 2020 and just under 4,000 cubic feet of recycling material from the district's one sort public recycling receptacles. We did do as recommended by the board. We performed the sidewalk pan and broom services once a month, March through October, which resulted in the removal of approximately 60 cubic feet of trash. We also performed the seasonal cleanups both in May and November. May was to get rid of sort of the winter grime, and then November is to do a final sweep before winter and hopefully remove as many leaves as possible from the sidewalks. Moving on, in terms of streetscape maintenance and repair, the main services there again were graffiti abatement, including posters and repair of any streetscape fixtures. We did remove just under 80 instances of graffiti within the district over the course of the year. We also did the spring and fall removal of the fence sections around your boulevard planting beds. And then moving on to the landscape maintenance and repair, we did the monthly weeding and debris removal and care of the pruning of the planting beds. We did install new mulch in the beds, and we mowed the center medians, plural, and watered as needed. We also had 5 younger trees that we installed the reservoir bags on and filled those with water weekly throughout the growing season. And then, of course, the final big project was the street pole banners. We did install all of your new street banners on the light poles. So hopefully you guys have gotten some good feedback on them. I know we all really like the design, and they certainly stand out in a good way. So obviously that was a good project. And then I'll just note that we do have the vendor monitoring them, your Streetscape vendor monitoring them. So if there are any issues, they report them to us, and then we can get them taken care of. So if anything happens to come loose, or sometimes a pole will get hit or something will happen to a pole. Certainly, if anybody sees anything, let us know. No harm, no foul there. We appreciate that. But so far, everything has stayed up there. And then last piece on the 2020 annual report, I will note that based on the amended budget, we did end the year with a surplus of $24,422. Those funds were rolled forward, so they are available in your 2021 budget year. So well, we can talk about that in a minute, but that has been approved and went to City Council. That was what we wanted to mention on the annual report. Any questions, comments about the annual report? Very good. All right, no action is required, so we can move on. Next up, we have the 2021 work plan and budget.
Kelby just joined us, by the way. So.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I saw you were on the phone, so I'm guessing you were
Yep.
maybe doing some quick tech report or support. Good afternoon, Kelby. How are you?
Oh, I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good. So both Dan Campo and Dan Leitner are here. Dan Campo has called in, and Dan Leitner is in his office. Kelby, also please know that by virtue of guidance from the city clerk's office, we are recording this meeting, and it will be posted to the city's YouTube channel. That policy started late last year for all service districts, all boards and commission meetings, which includes service districts. So just wanted to let you know, because I know sometimes you aren't always on your best behavior. So sorry. Okay.
Love the transparency.
So we had just finished up the 2020 annual report and had moved on to the 2021 work plan. And I will share my screen, and I will also then with Dan Campo being on the phone, just describe what we're looking at. So again, Dan Campo, this was in your packet, the amended 2021 budget. So again, your original budget recommendation that went to council late last year was a budget of $36,400. It has now been amended to include that surplus that we were just talking about from year-end 2020 with $24,422. So your amended budget is now $60,822. We did we split those dollars out to a couple different places, but please know that we have flexibility in where those dollars can be spent. Just kind of moving on just from the financials in terms of your work plan, we have been monitoring services, of course, with the vendor. We did just in the last week increase the frequency of emptying the receptacle down at 56th and Lyndale, the trash receptacle. It sounds like we have an individual who is residing in a vehicle down in front of Mount Olivet. And that there has been an increase in the usage of that receptacle. So we had been doing just the receptacles. So all the receptacles are emptied twice a week, and then the receptacle in front of Starbucks at 54th, we had been emptying every Wednesday in addition. So we've added that receptacle down in front of Mount Olivet to that Wednesday pickup as well, and expect that frequency, at least for the time being, should work, and make sure that isn't too full. Other than that, spring came a little early, so we've already completed your spring cleanup in the district. in terms of the sweeping and the pressure washing of the vertical elements. Still, the vendor's still working on the planting bed maintenance, so they're still going through and doing that. And if they haven't already, they will be installing the little fence sections at the corners of all the planting beds, just like we have done the last couple of years, which we've been really pleased with. Occasionally one goes missing or gets hit or damaged, but by and large, it's for a minimal investment. It's really helped protect those plants, just sort of providing that vertical signal to the public and to pets and bikes to kind of stay out of those planters. From there, we're really following the normal work plan that we've been following for you guys for the last couple of years. And I guess I'll just pause there. Any issues, any concerns? And then if there aren't any of those, we could talk about if there's any special project work that the group would like to accomplish this year. Any issues out there? Anybody seeing anything?
Nothing on mine.
Let's see, any, so I know in the past, we have talked about, some special projects. So obviously getting the banners was a big one. Certainly no obligation to, but if the group was interested, other districts, we have a couple more districts this year that have been interested in sidewalk planters. So these are, again, sort of vertical planters that are district maintained and purchased and installed and maintained. We have some districts that have increased their pan and broom services. So that might be, depending on what you're seeing out there, if the sidewalks seem pretty clean, then maybe that's not something that might need to be considered, but wanted to throw that out there. And then, certainly you'd have the option, you haven't done it in the past, but just to give you a sense, we do have a number of districts that do seasonal decor in the winter. So, garland on light poles, things like that. That if that was something you guys ever, again, wanted to think about, this would, this would be the meeting, I guess we'd ask if there's something in addition to the normal work plan that you wanted to accomplish. So again, no obligation. You've got a reserve, you can sit on it, and decide if at some point you either want to reduce your budget or pursue another big project. So I'll pause here and see if there's any comments.
This is Dan. This is Dan Campo. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we had originally talked about spending the money on the banners and then seeing where our budget was and where our reserves were, and continuing to invest in small ways to improve the service district. One of the things we talked about was hanging planters, and there was these raised plants. It was if we wanted additional banners and things like that. We were going to just continue to try and improve the service district. For the other members out there, what are all of your thoughts? Do we do like a hanging basket type of thing, or do we look at planters and discuss those items?
I think planters, works for me. To look at something like that, to look at cost on that.
Yeah, so we've got a couple different options. I would, a rule of thumb, just to give you some context, and Kelby, I'm sorry if I interrupted you, was we tend to go with a little bit larger planter just because they tend to hold up better. So it's roughly the capital costs installed are about $1,000 a planter, depending on how many locations. And then from a seasonal budget perspective, this is a rule of thumb, not a hard and fast. With plants, maintenance throughout an entire season, removal, and doing like a winter greening, with spruce tips, things like that in the planter, typically our costs have landed right around $1,000 a planter all in for a year for that. So just to give you kind of a quick rule of thumb, certainly smaller planters aren't as expensive, bigger planters would be, things like that. So Kelby, sorry if I jumped in there too fast to answer the question, if you had a comment.
No, that's okay. I also really like the idea of the planters. I know that's been kind of on our wish list, but like you said, we wanted to tackle the banners first. It sounds like we've got a really good surplus right now. So if there were ever a time to, make another project, it would probably be now.
Well, and I'll just add to that, we do have a couple of districts that we expect to be putting in a planter order this year with the goal of having everything out sort of by, sort of late summer, early fall. Probably wouldn't plant any sort of summer type, growing season material in it, but maybe would time it to kind of hit with winter greening for this year, and then think about next spring going with sort of a traditional growing season planters. So, conceivably, there could be some economies of scale if the group was interested, and we might be able to even get that planter unit price down a little bit, just based on the size of the order that we think will likely be going out to bid on here.
Yeah, Michael, just to clarify, it sounded like Dan might have been talking about hanging baskets and you're talking about sidewalk planters, like a raised planter on the sidewalk.
Yeah,
Just
well, I'm sorry if I misunderstood.
clarify that point.
Yeah, so everything I just described was for sidewalk planters. Hanging baskets, we do have some districts that have done those. They almost tend to be as expensive, if not a little bit more expensive from a maintenance perspective, because the watering costs. Sidewalk planter generally, unless it's really hot, we can, once a week watering is sufficient, maybe twice a week. If it's, that just a bigger ground planter will retain more water. With the hanging baskets, as you may know from either your business or your residence, those, when if we get a really hot spell, we really need to water those daily, if not twice a day. So it tends to increase the cost a little bit. But they, when done, people really like them. And, they really add, especially a vertical, sort of colorful element in the district. So both, I think, are good options, and we have districts that have done both. So I apologize, Dan Leitner. Go ahead, Dan Campo.
So my question is, obviously I'm not on the video part of the call, but can we get more information on both those options? And then it's a sort of a discussion on, we need dimensions, we need things like that. And then, does it interfere with snow removal? Does it make snow removal in the winter more difficult? What is the placement? Hanging baskets are easy. I think they bring the
I didn't hear that last part.
I was gonna say hanging baskets are easy because they're not on the ground, but they are more expensive. If we chose to do planters on the ground, can you give us dimensions, and where would we put them, and all of that? I'm just thinking about, as responsible for snow removal, what does that entail? Where are the planters? How many planters would we be looking at? And sort of formulating a plan there, if it be baskets or planters.
Yeah, I think we could certainly come up with a sort of a suggested location. You do have, fairly wide boulevards. So I feel like, sometimes we have districts where we don't have a lot of space in the right of way to be able to deploy planters. Your district with your wide sidewalks, I think we'd be in a pretty good position to be able to deploy them. And we certainly could scout out some locations and come back to the group with a with sort of a plan and a recommended size. The planter just again, a sidewalk planter, we typically we'll do like a 36 by 36 inch, by maybe a 30-inch tall planter, or 36-inch tall planter, just to give you a sense of the size. So if you go too much smaller, you make them too easy that, people can do stuff to them, so you want a little bit of half. Plus you want them to be big enough that they can, have a visual impact with the plants that you're putting in them. So we could definitely do that. And, we need to get through all the other boards before we'd be able to reconvene with you guys. So it would probably be later in the summer. So realistically, if we wanted to do hanging baskets, we'd probably be looking at an implementation for next year, but this would be a good year to do the planning on it. We could do a similar sort of hanging basket option, based on the number of poles you have, and do some pricing. There's a couple different options for the type of hanging baskets and how they are installed on the poles. So we could outline those as well and sort of do some rough cost estimates that option as well.
Yeah, that would be good to maybe have both options priced out and some locations mapped out. I think that would be really helpful.
So,
and if it's in 2022, that gives us even more opportunity to get even more of a surplus between now and then. So that would be even better.
That's a good point.
Michael, that might be a good lead-in to a discussion around the proposed 2022 budget, which would be, I think, the next slide, to see if you need to make any modifications based on the proposal.
Yes. So before we move on to 2022, any other ideas? Anything else you'd like us to explore? Those seem like one of those alone, I think, would be a pretty good next project, but I just want to pause and ask the question.
So to Michael's point, that would be something we would consider in the 2022 budget. You're asking, is there anything the board would like to see done this year?
Well, I guess there's two parts there. If you wanted planters, we could pursue that. Sidewalk planters, we could pursue the purchase of those this year with a late fall implementation with winter greening material. For timing purposes, we would probably be looking for really sort of a recommendation to, set a dollar value and say, let's spend up to, I'm making this up, $20,000 to buy planters and get winter greening installed this year. And we would just go ahead and do that this year. If you want to wait and see the options, we can do that on that, specifically on the sidewalk planter. We could wait. We probably would be looking at then again an implementation only in 2022, as Andy described. So there's sort of a this year option on the sidewalk planters or a next year option. Really only a next year option on the hanging baskets.
So my personal feeling is, I think we need to don't want to leap before we discuss future budgets and things like that, because if this is a commitment of $1,000 a planter, and then we're committing to, for however many planters there are, $1,000 a year in maintenance, we need to, while we have a surplus right now, we may not have a surplus in the future, and we should probably just sort of take all of that into account. So I don't know that I necessarily want to just jump with it or set a budgetary amount. I think it requires a little further discussion and a little planning. And then I also had, with this planters, I also want to discuss how, if there was anything else we could do with the plantings within the existing boxes, if there were other recommendations with those plantings that would help improve those.
Sure. Danelle and Kelby, thoughts on 2021?
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to do this smart, because we're representing our special service district, and I don't want to jump too fast and end up with something that's not like, exactly what we want and not a good use of that money.
No, yep, I agree too. We should really look into it before we make a commitment.
Very good. So based on that, we will put together some pricing, some plan options, well, really it'll be a sidewalk planter plan, with pricing, and a hanging basket plan with some preliminary pricing. And then what we'll do is it's going to take us through at least the end of July, if not early August, to get through all the other advisory boards. So we probably look to be convening you guys sometime maybe September, October. And then we could, sort of finalize a plan. So the one sort of chicken or the egg thing here is we would need you to adopt a 2022 budget recommendation today. So, but we wouldn't likely have all the information until afterward. While that sounds a little counterintuitive, based on your existing surplus that we know you had, the 24,422 from last year, plus what we would envision, since we haven't talked about any major different, deviations from the work plan for this year, we would expect an additional surplus from year-end 2021. So even with adopting a 2022 budget recommendation today, it seems very likely that we would have a pretty substantial surplus going into 2022 that come a year from now, when we're looking at a 23 budget, you really could, if there's any, significant changes you'd want to make to your ongoing budget, you could make it at that time for the future. But again, you'd have the surplus to sort of cushion financially until that time. How's that approach sound? And then that is a very good segue to the 2022 draft budget here in a second. But any questions on what I just said?
So this is Dan Campo. So basically what we're talking about then is that we had this current year for the 2022 budget, and then we're keeping all of the additional money that is unspent, those reserves, we're keeping them in reserves for the plan.
Yeah, you cut out at the very end, but I think you said for purchasing the whatever you guys decide, yes, if that was your question, Dan.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, yep.
And Michael, you mentioned we can get back together around September once we've come up with a plan and a layout for sidewalk planters and a concept for what a hanging basket would look like. And so we can make a decision there as a group. Is that kind of what you're talking about in September?
Exactly. I was just drawing out that we'll have already adopted a 2022 budget by the time we're going to be able to convene realistically. But, you will, again, all signs indicate that you'll have a sufficient surplus that you could decide in October to move forward with one of these options and still have enough financial resources available to implement everything and be able to maintain it through the end of 2022.
So without planning to budget for those things, the maintenance of those items, the sidewalk planters or the baskets, without planning for that budget, we have enough surplus to carry us through that year if we did decide in September to make that decision.
Yeah, and part of what I'm embedding in my statement is we'll be able, when we convene again to look at these options, we'll know based on the number of either hanging baskets the group recommends we buy, or the number of sidewalk planters that we would buy, we'll know what, we can do a quick forecast on what the implications are using the anticipated dollars available in 2022 will look like. So it may mean that, if there's a possibility that we might be, sort of close to exhausting all the resources, well, we'd have the option of either dialing back the number of either hanging baskets or sidewalk planters we would buy initially, because we can always split this out too. We could buy, I'm making up a number, 16 initially, and then, get them out, see how they look, see if it's enough. And then if there's a desire, we can always add more. So, but yes, David, to your question, I think based on the amount of the surpluses we have been carrying forward the last couple of years, based on your current work plan of work, it's likely, I can't guarantee it, but it's likely that there would be sufficient resources there for both the capital purchase of whatever the group would recommend and the maintenance of those for the first full year.
Okay, and we have to decide today whether we put that placeholder in the 2022 budget to allow us to actually do that, even though we don't know exactly what those costs will be.
Yes, but we have the option again to amend your 22 budget next spring when the amount of this year's surplus, assuming we have a surplus, is known, if that makes sense. So
sorry, if the group's confident that they want to do something, just we don't know exactly what it is yet, we could amend what the budget is today for 2022 and puts a placeholder in there for some dollar amount to, a placeholder for the maintenance in 2022.
That's exactly right. So let's, because this kind of has, I think this is a lot more useful to maybe think about this in more concrete terms. So this is your draft 2022 budget. It is a flat budget from 2021. So it is identical in terms of your original budget of service charges of 36,400 and proposed uses of 36,400. My thinking is that you could, if inclined, the board could adopt this budget recommendation today, and you would still a year from now be able to amend any surplus from the year end of, year-end 2021 surplus, which will be at least 24,000 and very likely 24,000 plus the surplus from the 2021 operating year. So think of it as, probably another $30,000. And I'm using these terms very carefully. I mean, we got to get through the year. Things can happen, So, so I think when we meet in October, I think we'll have an even better sense of what this year's costs look like, be able to forecast out a year in 2021 and be able to say, hey, I'm making up numbers here. It looks like we're going to end year 2021 with a surplus of $30,000. So that would be, you'd be able to amend your 22 budget from 36,400, adding that 30,000 for a total of 66,400. And I feel confident that we would just know, we would make the conscious decision to, recognize what the operating costs would be in based on the number of items we would buy. So we would align the purchase of whatever it is that the group ultimately recommends to make sure we're only buying the quantity that you can afford within your forecasted budget and your available budget in 2022, if that makes sense.
So in summary, we're talking about just proceeding with the budget as it is, banking the surpluses that we have, and making a decision in September on planters and other streetscape items. Correct?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay. that sounds good.
Do we need an official motion? Yeah. Do we need an official motion to do that?
So all we really need is a motion on the draft 2022 budget recommendation. If there's a motion to adopt the draft budget as presented, that's really the only action item that the group would need to take here today. So I would just
I
be
move to adopt the recommended 2022 budget.
good. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded.
And then if there's no further
So, to be
discussion,
clear, that was a motion by Kelby, seconded by which Dan?
I said Dan L. I heard Dan L. first.
Okay, we heard Dan L first. All right, good to go.
If there's no further discussion, I can call the roll on that motion to adopt the 2022 budget and work plan recommendation as drafted. Dan Campo,
Yes.
Kelby Howell,
Aye.
and Leitner.
Yes.
Good. That motion and recommendation is adopted. So what we will do, just to recap, we'll put together some, two options. One for sidewalk planters based on the space available and where we would recommend. And Dan Campo, to the comment you made, snow removal is definitely top of mind when we're scouting out locations for sidewalk planters, as are, routine deliveries that a business might have, things like that. So we obviously don't want to create any problems by putting these things out there. So we definitely, spacing considerations, pedestrian flow, any deliveries, drop-offs, things like that, snow removal, and then certainly visibility of the planter is another consideration. So we will do an option for at least an initial option for sidewalk planters. We will do the same for hanging baskets. We'll convene sometime in that September, October timeframe. September sometimes gets a little tight just because that's when we're holding all the public hearings. So I can't commit that it would be September, but certainly sometime in October, we should have enough bandwidth to be able to reconvene the group and be able to come back with those ideas. And then, and to be clear, we'll do that. You've said, no train has left the station, if you will. There's no obligation that the group go forward with either option at that point. So know that we can, you'd have the ability to say yes to one of the options, and I mean, subject to our conversation and any modifications, or continue to evaluate other options as well. So please know, again, you won't be setting anything in motion. With that, there was just also to recap, there was no action required on the 2021 work plan agenda item. So just wanted to make that clear. Are there any other discussion items? I will just note we will soon wrap up the administration of all of the oaths. I think Dan Campo, I think you're the only board member remaining. And if you haven't already, please do jump on and complete that ethics training, that online ethics training course. The clerk's office tracks that very closely on our behalf, and they are not shy about letting us know when a board member hasn't completed that. So if you haven't already, if you could get that taken care of.
Michael, if I could just interject for a second, since it looks like we're going to wrap up a little bit early, if you haven't taken the ethics training yet, you can use this last 45 minutes to complete your training, and you'd still be on time.
We are nothing if not persistent on the need to complete both of those items, as you can tell, gentlemen.
And David is going to email that to all three of you, so it's at the top of your inbox right now. Right, David?
I certainly can do that.
All right.
Question about that. How often does it need to be done? Because I did mine either last year or end of 2019.
So yeah, it's good for 4 years if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Nice.
So,
But, if you just want a refresher on ethics, it's never a bad idea.
Ethics are important. I'll take that duly noted.
yes, I don't think there was any insinuation on Andrew's part, Kelby, that a refresher on ethics is something that you personally might want to consider. Well, hey, anything else? Otherwise, we can wrap up. I don't want to cut this short if there are other items the group wants to talk about, but we certainly recognize that you guys would like your afternoon as well.
Yeah, two potential things that I'd like to submit for consideration if
Please.
we end up not doing the hanging boxes or the planter boxes. I do like the idea of switching over to winter decorations in the winter. I think that would look really nice. But I also don't want to do too much at once. But that could be something to really talk about. The other thing would be maybe a mural if we had space where we could do it and a good concept.
On a building?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly where murals go these days, like where you put them, but yeah, I think that that's just something to. I don't know. It's been a rough year and a half here, and I think that people could use a little bit of uplifting. So if we don't end up moving forward with other projects, it might be something to consider. But I also don't know if we're like how we'd go about doing that since all the buildings are businesses. So something to think about.
No, I appreciate the suggestion. And
Kelby?
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Dan Campbell. Kelby, if you want to get murals on the side of the building that you work in, I do have the muralist who has done all the murals at South Lyndale Liquors, and you and I can have that conversation offline from this meeting, and I can get you set up with that too as an idea.
I guess if you send over the like, if you could email over the info. I'm not actually looking to have that done on the building in which I currently work. Not specifically not wanting it, but also like it's not my building, so I don't want to go down that road unless if I have the support of the building owner. If you catch it.
Yep. I was going to say, otherwise, I'm sure there's no harm in just causing it to happen, Kelby, and your employer would certainly appreciate your obligation of them. I'm teasing, of course. So, well, no, I think it's an interesting idea. I will say we have not had a service district funded mural done. We'd have to do a little bit more investigation on our part if it's not something that's in the right of way. But it's not to say that it can't happen. Certainly, winter decorations is something we do very routinely, and quite candidly, we just know those numbers so well. We could certainly add that to our discussion this fall. So even just so you had a sense of what it might look like in the future, once we're all staring at a map with the light poles on it, for example, it's not it's not hard to begin to describe, sort of what other districts have done in terms of winter decor and things like that. So know that those are that's certainly something we could add to the conversation. And then it's probably more of an even longer term project because your district currently doesn't have an SSD maintained electrical system, but we do have a number of districts. When you think of like Lynn Lake and Linden Hills and Uptown, Lowry Hill and other areas, they actually have an electrical system that we can plug in, lit winter seasonal decor. So whether it's lit garland on light poles or sort of LED snowflake type fixtures that could be hung on a light pole, or we certainly have a number of districts that do sprinkle lights on their boulevard street trees. So again, that's a little bit different scale of cost than we've talked about in the past. So that would definitely be something you'd, if the group was interested, that would take more planning and more preparation financially. But just to give you a sense of the art of the possible, what other districts have certainly done and how they've, continued to make that investment, back to Dan Campo's comment earlier in their districts. So.
Yeah, I think that would be good to get some numbers on and discuss further in the fall, especially if we don't end up moving forward with the planting boxes at the time, because I'm assuming that will be a more expensive initial investment, and while we have a good surplus, might be a good time to do that too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
But in the meantime, certainly reach out to us if you've seen anything, any planting bed issues, any trash stuff that we need to be paying attention to, banners, banner repair, maintenance, that kind of stuff. If you notice anything, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll try to act quickly. So.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else? Anybody? All right. Less than a 60-minute meeting. We are getting pretty efficient at this, gentlemen. So, well, with that, thank you again for your time. We'll certainly be in touch over the course of the summer. And as David said, if anything pops up, call, email, text. Those are all good options for reaching one or all of us. As we get through the public hearing cycle in the fall, that's when we'll be reaching out to Canvas for meeting date options, sort of again in that fall timeframe. So, but again, know we're available and reachable until then. Otherwise, we'll just keep, implementing your work plan as desired. We'll bring forward the budget recommendation for next year, and hope you all have a great summer.
All right.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks,
Talk to you in
everybody.
the fall.
Great. With that, we'll adjourn this meeting at 1:23. Thank you, everyone.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you
Bye-bye.
guys.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye.